She didn't deserve what happened to her.
Dallas police investigating after a woman was found dead in an East Oak Cliff home on Sunday. Family says her body was found in a freezer. Dallas Fire Rescue responded to a fire at the same address hours after police were there.
There are things that happen in this world that the mind refuses to process on first contact. Not because the facts are complicated, but because the facts are so deliberate, so calculated, so far removed from anything a reasonable person would do that the brain needs a moment to catch up to what it is reading. This is one of those cases. What was found inside that house on a Sunday afternoon in Texas was not the result of a moment that spiraled out of control. It was not a crime of passion. It was not someone who panicked and ran. What was found inside that house required planning. It required effort. It required a decision to conceal rather than flee. And then hours after police left that scene, after the evidence was collected and the investigators drove away, something else happened at that same house that this city is still trying to explain. Here is the question that has been sitting over this case since the moment it broke. Two things happened at that house on the same day. One of them killed a young woman. The other one may have been designed to make sure nobody ever found out how. Those two things together tell you something about the person responsible that no arrest record or criminal profile can fully capture. They were not panicking. They were managing. And a person who manages the aftermath of something like this that carefully is the most dangerous kind of person to still have walking free. Do you think the fire and the murder are connected? Drop your answer in the comments right now, because by the time this episode is over, that question is going to sit with you very differently than it does at this moment. Welcome to Crime Cipher. We decode the cases the headlines summarize and the truth the system leaves behind. Subscribe if you are new here. This one does not let go. East Oak Cliff sits on the southern side of Dallas, Texas. It is a neighborhood that has its own rhythm, its own character, its own community of people who have built their lives there across generations. Georgia Avenue runs through it the way streets run through neighborhoods like this everywhere. Houses close together. People who know their neighbors. A community that notices when something feels wrong even if it does not always know what to do with that feeling. The 1400 block of Georgia Avenue has a house on it that the neighborhood already knew about before Sunday, May 10, 2026. Not because it was occupied, because it was not. The house was officially vacant. But vacant did not mean empty in any meaningful sense of the word. Neighbors had been watching people go in and out of that house at all hours of the night for long enough that it had become part of the landscape of that block. A place that existed in the background of the neighborhood. A place people knew about without talking about openly. A place where whatever was happening inside stayed inside. Until Sunday afternoon at 2:30 p.m. when Dallas police officers responded to a call at that address. What they found when they walked through that door did not just open a homicide investigation. It opened a question about how long something this deliberate had been hidden inside a house that an entire neighborhood had been watching without knowing what it contained. But before we get to what was inside that house, you need to know who Mariah Murray was. Because she was not just a name in a police report. She was somebody. And the people who loved her are standing on that street right now asking strangers to speak up for her. Therefore, that is exactly what Crime Cipher is going to do. Mariah Murray was 27 years old. A Dallas woman. A friend. Someone her family describes as a good spirit in the specific way people describe someone whose energy in a room was something you felt before you even spoke to them. She loved to laugh. She loved to play. She was the kind of person whose presence registered with people not because she demanded attention, but because she carried something genuine that people were drawn to without always being able to explain why. Her family has been careful in how they have spoken publicly about Mariah. Not defensive. The kind of careful that comes from loving someone completely while also being honest about the world they were navigating. One relative told reporters she had plenty of options, but people choose to do what they want to do. But whatever they chose, she did not deserve what happened. That sentence carries everything this family is holding right now. The complexity of loving someone whose choices you did not always agree with. The absolute clarity that none of those choices justified what was done to her. Those two things can exist at the same time, and this family is living inside both of them simultaneously.
Oh, she had plenty of options, but people choose to do what they want to do. But whatever she chose, she didn't deserve what happened. Man, Mariah had a good spirit, always laughing. She loved to play. People just make mistakes. You know, maybe she was hanging with the wrong people.
Another family member said it even more directly. People just make mistakes. Maybe she was hanging with the wrong people. Somebody had to see something and somebody had to know something, so they need to speak up. We want justice. We want whoever did it found. Point blank.
They had to see something, and somebody had to know something. So they need to speak up. So whoever did it, we want justice. We want whoever did it found. Point blank, period.
Do you have any idea who it could be?
No.
That is not the language of a family that has given up. That is the language of people who are angry and grieving at the same time, and who have decided that anger is going to be useful rather than consuming. They stood at that crime scene this week. They went back to the place where their person was found, and they stood there in public asking strangers to do the right thing. That takes a particular kind of strength that deserves to be named. What brought Mariah to that specific house on Georgia Avenue is a question her family cannot fully answer. They do not know what would have taken her there. They know she had options. They know she had people in her life. But therefore something on that Sunday led her to a vacant house in East Oak Cliff that the neighborhood already knew was being used for things that happened after dark. Whatever that something was, it is part of the story that investigators are still trying to piece together. Because understanding why Mariah was in that house is connected to understanding who else was in that house with her. And that connection is where this investigation lies right now. On Sunday, May 10, 2026, at 2:30 in the afternoon, Dallas police officers responded to a call at the 1400 block of Georgia Avenue in East Oak Cliff. The details of what prompted that specific call have not been publicly released by investigators. What is confirmed is that when officers walked through the door of that vacant house on Georgia Avenue, they found Mariah Murray. She was inside a freezer. Sit with that for a moment. Not in a chair. Not on the floor. Not in a room that suggested a confrontation that escalated beyond control. Inside a freezer. In a vacant house in a neighborhood where people had been watching strangers come and go at all hours of the night for long enough that it had become unremarkable. Someone put Mariah Murray in that freezer. That act alone tells you things about this crime that no official statement has had to spell out. A freezer is not where a body ends up accidentally. A freezer is not where a body ends up in the chaos of a moment that got out of hand. A freezer is where a body ends up when someone makes a deliberate decision about what happens next. The cause of Mariah's death has not been confirmed by the medical examiner. The manner of death has not been released. What is confirmed is that Dallas police are treating this as a homicide. Detectives are working to determine the circumstances of her death. No suspect has been named. No motive has been released. The investigation is active and ongoing. But here is where this case takes a turn that nobody who has been following it has been able to fully process. After officers finished processing that crime scene on Sunday afternoon, after investigators documented everything inside that vacant house and drove away from Georgia Avenue, Dallas Fire Rescue received a call. A fire had broken out at the same abandoned house on Georgia Avenue. The same house, the same address, hours after police had been there. Hours after the body of Mariah Murray had been removed from that freezer, and that location had been processed as an active homicide scene. Investigators are working to determine whether that fire was intentionally set and whether it is connected to the homicide. Those two questions are officially separate investigations, but the timeline connects them in a way that the East Oak Cliff neighborhood, Mariah's family, and anyone following this case cannot ignore. Police process a murder scene. They leave. That same location catches fire. Either that is the most devastating coincidence this case has produced, or someone was watching. Someone knew the police had been there. Someone knew what had been found. And someone made a decision to go back to that house after the investigators left and burn whatever was left inside it. If that is what happened, then this case is not just about a murder. It is about a murder followed by an active attempt to obstruct the investigation into that murder. And a person willing to return to a crime scene after police have already been there to destroy evidence is a person operating with a level of calculation that should concern every person in that neighborhood. A neighbor confirmed to reporters that the house on Georgia Avenue had been a known location for illegal drug activity. People going in and out at all hours. A revolving door of activity in a house that was supposed to be empty. That detail does not answer the question of what happened to Mariah Murray, but it tells you something about the environment she walked into that Sunday. And it tells you something about why her family believes that somebody in that neighborhood knows exactly what happened inside that house. Because in a location with that much foot traffic, with that many people moving through it at all hours, the idea that nobody saw anything is the part of this case that does not sit right with anyone who knows how these blocks work. Detective C. Fehrenbach is the lead investigator on this case. Dallas police are asking anyone with information to contact the detective directly at 214-671-3671. That number is not just a formality at the end of a press release. That number is the difference between this case moving forward and this case going cold while whoever put Mariah Murray in that freezer keeps living their life on the other side of a silence that an entire neighborhood is holding. There are two things that happened on Georgia Avenue on Sunday, May 10, 2026, that this case cannot move past until they are answered. The first is how Mariah Murray ended up in that freezer. The second is who set that house on fire after the police left. Those two questions are not separate. They are the same question asked from two different directions. And the answer to both of them is sitting somewhere in East Oak Cliff right now inside someone who has not yet decided to speak. Mariah's cousin stood at that crime scene this week and said something that deserves to be the last human voice you hear before this episode ends. All of these people around here, somebody knows who did it. Somebody's seen her. They know who did it.
All of these people around her, somebody know who did it. Somebody seen her. They know who did it.
That is not an accusation aimed at a specific person. That is a statement about how neighborhoods work. About how in a block where people notice strangers coming and going at all hours, it is statistically impossible that nobody saw anything on the day Mariah Murray walked into that house. Someone in that community is carrying information that Mariah's family needs. Not because it would bring her back. Nothing does that. But because the alternative is a person who put a 27-year-old woman in a freezer and then went back to burn the evidence walking free while her family stands on a public street asking strangers for help. That alternative is not acceptable. Not to her family. Not to that neighborhood. Not to anyone watching this episode right now. Here is the theory's framework this case demands, because the investigation has not yet produced a clean answer and the audience deserves the tools to think about it clearly. Mariah was killed at that location, and the freezer was the planned method of disposal. The person responsible had access to that house, knew it was vacant, knew the neighborhood, and used it deliberately. The fire was set by the same person to destroy forensic evidence after learning police had already been there. The house on Georgia Avenue was a known drug location. Mariah may have been present during an event connected to that activity. The murder was the result of something that happened inside that environment. The fire was set by someone connected to the drug activity who feared the investigation would expose more than just a murder. Mariah's own family has raised this possibility. She may have made a mistake about who she trusted that Sunday. The person or people she was with made a decision she never agreed to. The freezer and the fire were attempts by that person or those people to buy time before anyone started asking questions. Any one of those frameworks could be true. What all three of them share is this. Somebody in East Oak Cliff knows which one it is. And that somebody has a phone. Detective C. Fair box number is 214-671-3671. Dallas police are also accepting anonymous tips. The information does not have to come with a name attached to it. It just has to come. If this episode moved you, share it with someone in the Dallas area. Share it with someone who knows East Oak Cliff. Share it with anyone who might have a piece of this puzzle without realizing how much it matters. Every view this episode gets is another set of eyes on Mariah Murray's case. Every share is another chance that the right person sees it and makes the call that changes everything. Subscribe to Crime Cipher so you do not miss the follow-up when this case develops. Because we will be back the moment it does. Drop your answer to the question we planted at the start of this episode in the comments below. Do you think the fire and the murder are connected? And if so, what do you think that connection tells us about who did this? This has been Crime Cipher. We decode the cases the system hopes you forget. Until next time, stay sharp out there. Because the most dangerous thing is not always the crime itself. Sometimes it is the silence that follows it.